it's Gillian Rightford. I'm from AdTherapy, and we're going to talk about briefs today and the most common problems. The briefs could be the brief that the client gives to the agency. The brief could also be the brief that is written internally in the agency, because the same problems actually apply. So I've made a list of what I think are the 5 most common problems, and I'm going to go through them one by one. The first problem is that briefs are often too long. The point of a brief is that you've got to make choices, and you've got to actually whittle down what you want to say, and you've got to be careful and wise about the words that you choose and what you put into them. It's not a place to write down everything you know. What you're wanting to do with the brief is you're wanting to be very clear about what your objectives are, very clear about what needs to be done, and you need to be inspiring, and you need to write it in a way that somebody actually wants to work on it. I heard a great definition of a brief being an ad for an ad. And what it is you are actually trying to persuade the people who are going to receive your brief, which is either the agency or the creative people, that they actually want to work on it and that they can't wait to work on it, in fact, and they can't wait to do great work on it. So it's got to be selective. You've got to do your strategic thinking before you write the brief. The biggest problem with long briefs is that people write them too quickly. So Winston Churchill had that wonderful quote, which was, "Forgive me for writing you a long letter, I have not had the time to write a short one." That's exactly what applies to briefs. If you just cut and paste from last year, or you just sit down and bang it out because it's got to be emailed to the agency, it's going to be long, it's going to be flabby, and it's going to be a problem. So that's number 1, too long. Number 2 is part of that, and it's too many options. The number of times I see in a brief primary objective, and then I see 3. Primary means 1, it means single. There is a single objective for a brief because it is a single piece of communication. If it's a campaign brief, that's fine, but then you still only have 1 objective. Because if you have 3 objectives, or 5 objectives, or 27 sub-objectives, or secondary points, it's going to be a mess. It's like the statue of David. Michelangelo was asked how he made it, and he said, "I just took a block of marble and chipped away everything that wasn't David." That's exactly what it is. You have to know what it is that you're trying to achieve and be very clear about what your single-minded objective is. Point 3, I've called fuzzy logic. And what I mean by fuzzy logic is that you haven't really thought it through. We want to achieve X by doing Y, but it doesn't actually work. And there's no clear line between what you're actually setting out to do and what you are actually going to offer the consumer in the end. The objective has to be clear, but equally the consumer insight has to be clear. What's in it for the consumer has to be clear, and there has to be a line that runs through all of those things. So the logic needs to be absolutely solid. We want to achieve this because consumers need or want that, and we can offer them this. If you haven't figured that out, don't bother writing the brief, because it's going to be vague and unclear. The next one, point number 4, is no WI IFM. So what does that mean? What's in it for me? We write briefs from our point of view, but really what we should be doing is writing them from the consumer's point of view. Do we really have something to offer them? And if not, why are we doing this ad? We need to really figure out that what we've got is of benefit to them. And that involves doing your consumer work up front, doing your product work up front, and actually, in some instances, not believing your own PR. So a lot of marketers, a lot of people will sit down and think, well, consumers are going to love this because it's fantastic and we love this. But it's not necessarily going to happen. So unless you can have a very clear consumer benefit and be able to articulate that in a brief to an agency or to your creative team, it's very difficult for them to actually come up with anything that is going to create great advertising, or advertising that is anyway persuasive or interesting or effective at all. The last point is that I think that a lot of briefs are just simply too prescriptive. We need a TV ad. Why do you need a TV ad? What is the communication challenge? What is the business challenge? You might not need an ad at all. I've worked on a lot of projects where the brief was do a TV ad, and actually what the real problem was, it was a packaging problem. And making a TV ad just irritated the consumer even more. So the prescriptiveness of please make me a radio ad, if you have a radio media, if you've got media booked and you need something, that should be the exception rather than the rule. Rather put in the brief what the requirement is, what the business challenge is, what the marketing challenge is, and leave it to the agency to figure out what the best solution is. Probably the very best example I can think of for this recently is the example of the leukemia bone marrow donor campaign that was done by Droga 5, where the brief was increase bone marrow donors. And the answer was to come up with a new way of collecting blood by partnering with a plaster company. It's insanely good. And it worked, and it got millions more bone marrow donors. So the point is, if they'd just been asked to do a TV ad or a poster for clinics, you would never have got that result. So too prescriptive. So if I have to sum up my five sins in brief writing: too long, too many options, fuzzy logic, know what's in it for me for the consumer, and too prescriptive. And that's it.